Hello, my friends of the Psychedelic Renaissance. It's Tom Hatsis, your psychedelic historian, and this is Star Food. In this clip from my larger talk, Psykedelik Christianity, the greatest story never told, I briefly examine two Christian groups in the ancient world who, scholars believe, might have used entheogens as part of their religious culture. If you're into this kind of content, please give this video a like and a share, and don't forget to subscribe to the Psychedelic Historian YouTube page. Also, it'd be great to see you on Instagram, finally at Psychedelic Historian. With that out of the way, let's get into it. And of those magi that I mentioned earlier, we know from the author Pliny in his book Natural History that magi were familiar with various substances that caused visionary states. But there is a little known story that was discovered by the University of Austin professor Brent Landau titled Revelation of the Magi. The story goes that the Magi had spent thousands of years performing a sacred ritual in anticipation of a star that would announce the coming of God in the likeness of a human. On the 25th of every month, the Magi would cleanse themselves in a small spring called the Spring of Purification, at the foot of what was called the Mountain of Victories. As they wash themselves, they engage in prayer after scaling the Mountain of Victories on the first day of the following month. 2 days later, they enter the Cave of Treasures of Hidden Mysteries, where they engage in more prayer and read from the Book of Seth. They would then descend from the mountain and tell all who would listen about their teachings. At long last, the star appears and the Magi follow it to Bethlehem. On their journey, the beam from the star causes the Magi's food to multiply, somewhat similar to the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000 with the 7 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Once the Magi reach Bethlehem, the star transforms into a small child who tells them to proclaim the good news to their people back home. Once arrived back in their homeland, they share some of this star food, as it was called, with their country folk, who upon eating it, see visions of Jesus and convert to Christianity. Landau hypothesizes that an early Christian group used some kind of psychedelic substance and created this story around such usage, to explain their practices. This text gets even more interesting because, as Landau interprets it, the Magi not only ate, the kind of visionary provision, as it's called in the text, but also share it with their community members who also have visions. So normally in these kinds of stories, something like Second Esdras, it's some kind of prophet, and that's why they're able to have these psychedelic experiences. In this case, ordinary people are eating this star food and having visions, which Landau thinks really strongly suggests some kind of entheogen, and I just so happen to agree with him. This group who wrote this story, the Revelation of the Magi, and we don't really know who they were. There's only one text of the Revelation of the Magi written in Syriac, so thankfully Professor Landau could read Syriac. But this group is not the only Christian group that possibly used psychedelics for visionary purposes that we know about. One group with roots stretching back to antiquity that certainly employed visionary plants, like we have good evidence for this, still existed as late as the 1800s. Tucked away in the northern region of the Caucasus Mountains, the curious explorer will find the Ossetians, a group with Iranian origins whose beliefs have been called a bizarre mixture of Christianity and ancient superstition. They worshiped the Hebrew prophet Elijah, sacrificed goats to him, ate the meat, skinned the carcasses, and placed the fleeces under a tree. They then prayed to Elijah to bestow an abundant harvest upon them. They also prophesied by intoxicating themselves with smoke from burning the highly psychoactive rhododendron bush, falling into a deep sleep, and interpreting the lucid dreams that followed as real events.